When my face was shoved into a 5-tier wedding cake in the middle of the ballroom, more than 170 pairs of eyes were watching. Some were recording with their phones, others were struggling to hold back laughter. But not a single person defended me. Not even Nadira, my own daughter. I still remember how that night began. The wedding was held at the Grand Sismita Pavilion in Kemang, South Jakarta, a grand venue where ministers and celebrities married off their children. The wedding was held at Grand Regency Pavilion, an opulent venue in Los Angeles where senators and Hollywood elites married off their children. I had never imagined setting foot in a place like that, let alone for the wedding of my only child. The ballroom's towering ceiling shimmered under massive crystal chandeliers that sparkled like constellations. White and gold decor draped every corner of the room. Fresh orchids, supposedly sourced from the private florist of a former ambassador's wife, were arranged in tall standing displays every few feet, their fragrance expensive and refined. Guests sat on transparent acrylic chairs that looked fragile, yet somehow radiated understated luxury. Each table was set with dinner plates trimmed in real gold, not gold paint, but genuine gold leaf. I knew because Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, my daughter's in-laws, had proudly boasted about it to the guest beside her. A string quartet played soft instrumental jazz, the kind that makes you feel as if you've stepped into an aristocratic European gala. Elegant, exclusive, expensive. And I was seated at the very edge of the room, near the coat rack, as if I didn't belong there at all. I wore an old gray batik shirt I had owned since Nadira graduated high school. My leather shoes were worn and slightly faded at the edges. In my hands was a small envelope containing a modest wedding gift, about $300, and a handwritten letter of blessing I had written that morning. Deep down, I hoped Nadira would find the time to read it, but I wasn't sure she cared about anything I said anymore. Bayou, or rather Brandon, my son-in-law, and his family were seated in the VIP section near the stage. His mother, Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, wore a maroon gown covered in intricate beadwork. Diamonds circled her neck, wrists, and ears. A designer clutch rested on her lap like a trophy. Mr. Harold Whitmore, her husband, wore a tailored formal suit and carried an unlit cigar, perhaps purely for effect. Brandon himself stood tall in an ivory tuxedo, a watch gleaming on his wrist, one that I was certain cost more than my 2011 Toyota ever had. They laughed freely, posing for photos with prominent guests. Occasionally, their eyes drifted toward me. Not warm glances, but questioning ones. Why is that man here? I tried not to care. I wasn't there for them. I was there for my daughter. Even though she hadn't invited me personally, even though she hadn't answered my calls or messages for the past 33 days, I came anyway. She is my daughter, my flesh and blood, the only family I have left since my wife, her mother, passed away 10 years ago. The ceremony flowed seamlessly, speeches from both families, though none from mine, a prayer, a choreographed dance performance. A famous pop singer, someone I often heard on the radio, performed live. Guests indulged in a lavish buffet filled with dishes whose names I could barely pronounce. I took only plain rice and a small portion of vegetables. My stomach had been uneasy all evening. Maybe nerves, maybe my blood sugar, something I always had to monitor carefully. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for, the cutting of the wedding cake. The 5-tiered masterpiece stood proudly on the grand table, decorated with intricate fondant flowers and delicate flecks of edible gold. The MC, a charismatic television host, led the countdown energetically. 3, 2, 1. Spotlights focused on the couple and the cake. Phones lifted higher. Everyone wanted the perfect shot. I moved closer into the crowd, smiling awkwardly, hoping to witness my daughter's happiness from just a few feet away. Nadira, or rather Natalie, looked breathtaking in her shimmering wedding gown. Her hair was styled flawlessly, her makeup immaculate. But her smile looked stiff. Or perhaps that was only my imagination. Brandon held the knife to cut the first slice. Then his eyes met mine. His smile shifted. There was something in it, something sharp, something cruel. Without warning, he called out loudly, "Sir, come here, try the cake first. They say it's incredibly sweet." Several guests turned toward me. Confused, I stepped forward. My palms were damp with sweat, my heart pounded violently. The moment I was close enough, Brandon grabbed the back of my head and shoved it hard, straight into the cake. I had no time to react. My face sank into soft, sticky frosting and sponge. The cake collapsed under the force. Cream smeared across my face, my neck, even into the collar of my old shirt. For a second, silence. Then soft laughter rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted higher. Camera shutters clicked repeatedly. Flashlights blinded my frost-covered eyes. Cream slipped into my mouth. Sweet. Far too sweet. I knew instantly my blood sugar would spike. But that wasn't the real pain. The real pain was in my chest. My hands trembled, not from anger, but from my body reacting to the sugar flooding my system. I wiped my face with napkins from a nearby table. Frosting clung to my hair, my eyebrows, even my ears. I looked at Brandon. He was laughing loudly, slapping his own shoulder as if he had just performed the greatest joke of the evening. His relatives laughed with him. Mrs. Whitmore covered her mouth, whispering to the guest beside her, "Oh my God, that's hilarious." I searched for Natalie. She stood right beside him. Her expression was confused, embarrassed. But she did nothing. She didn't defend me. She didn't stop him. She simply stood there, beautiful, motionless, voiceless. I looked around. Not one person from Brandon's family stepped forward. No one offered extra napkins. No one asked if I was all right. They were busy recording, uploading, posting. I could see their fingers moving swiftly across their screens. I stood slowly. My legs felt heavy. My head spun, maybe from the sugar, maybe from humiliation, maybe from a heartbreak too deep to measure. But I forced myself to stand tall. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me collapse. I would not let them see me break. Inside my mind, one thought kept echoing. They think I have no dignity. They think I'm just a poor father from some rural backwater who deserves to be treated like this. They have no idea who I really am. They have no idea what I've been hiding all these years. They don't realize that I've been quietly holding control over many of the very things behind the curtain of their glamorous lives. I looked at the ruined cake in front of me. Then I looked at Brandon, still smiling in triumph. Then at Natalie, standing frozen beside him, confusion written across her face. And I knew. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. They would find out soon enough, because starting tonight, this celebration was no longer theirs. They think I'm just a small-time retiree from some forgotten corner of the city. What they don't know is that I'm the one who financed the digital education platform their own children used during the pandemic. My house is modest, very modest. A half-brick, half-wood rental unit in a crowded neighborhood of Queens, a place I've lived in since Natalie was in elementary school. The house has only 2 small bedrooms, a living room that doubles as a dining area, and a narrow kitchen in the back. The roof is corrugated metal that leaks during heavy rain. The paint peels from the walls. There's no air conditioning, only an old, noisy fan that faithfully spins every night. Every day, I ride an old motorcycle, a battered 2008 Honda I've owned for nearly 15 years. The body is dull, the exhaust occasionally smokes, but it still runs. I rarely drive my 2011 Toyota, Gasoline is expensive, and what do I need a car for? I don't need it to visit the corner store or attend Sunday service. I buy groceries from a small family shop down the street. Rice by the pound, a few fresh vegetables, sometimes eggs or tofu if I have extra cash. My meals are simple: white rice and clear vegetable soup. Sometimes fried tofu or salted fish. Never luxurious, never excessive. Just enough to fill the stomach and keep the body going. Natalie grew up in that environment. She was a good child, a brilliant one. Always at the top of her class. Awards, certificates, recognition. When she graduated high school and earned admission to a state university through academic merit, I cried alone in my room. My only child had made it, without expensive tutoring, without private lessons, just discipline and intelligence. But there was something Natalie never knew. Since high school, every dollar of her tuition had not come from my salary or pension. It came from dividends, from shares I owned in a technology company now valued in the billions. A company whose platform she herself used for online learning during the pandemic. It all began in 2009. At the time, I was working as a freelance accountant. Nothing glamorous, just helping small business owners and family diners manage their books. The income was modest, but enough for daily expenses and Natalie's elementary school fees. One afternoon, at a coffee shop near Grand Central Terminal, I overheard two young men deep in conversation. They were computer science students from Columbia University. Long hair, worn-out t-shirts, but their eyes burned with ambition. They were discussing an idea, an online education platform aligned with the national curriculum. Accessible anytime, affordable, even free for underprivileged students. The idea was simple, but brilliant. I didn't understand technology at the time. I barely knew how to use a computer properly. But I understood people, and I saw the future in their eyes. They needed seed funding. Not much, about $70,000, to purchase servers, hire programmers, and build the first version of the platform. No investor would touch them. Banks refused. Even their own families didn't believe in the project. So I made what many would call a reckless decision. I gave nearly everything I had saved, $68,500. Money I had worked years to accumulate. Money meant for my retirement, for Natalie's future. They were stunned. They even tried to refuse. I told them, I don't need guarantees, just one thing. If this succeeds, I want a small share of the company. They agreed, and I became the first investor in what would later be named Bright Path Learning. The first 3 years were brutal. No profit, near bankruptcy. I had already accepted that the money was gone, but they refused to quit. They improved the system, expanded features, built partnerships. Then in 2012, everything changed. Schools began adopting the platform. Students subscribed. Eventually, federal education programs endorsed it. Then came a major offer. A large international tech corporation proposed a merger. As the earliest investor, I secured a permanent 8% equity stake. 8%. By 2021, that stake had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. My annual dividends reached nearly $2.6 million. $2.6 million a year. Enough to buy a mansion, a sports car, travel internationally every month. But I did none of that. I stayed in the same rented house, rode the same old motorcycle, ate the same simple meals. Why? Because money can destroy character, especially within families. I've seen wealthy clients manipulated by their own children. I've seen siblings tear each other apart over inheritance. I've seen children who only call their parents when they need money. I refused to let that become my story. I wanted to be certain that anyone who approached Natalie loved her for who she was, not for who her father was, not for the money I possessed. So I disguised myself as an ordinary father living paycheck to paycheck. I don't have social media. I never show off. I never told anyone, not even Natalie. Then Brandon entered her life. Handsome, confident, from a wealthy family that owned a real estate development company. They met at a university seminar. They dated, then they decided to marry. And that was when my true test began. The engagement dinner was held at an upscale restaurant in Beverly Hills. I arrived wearing my old gray shirt and the same shoes I later wore to the wedding. Brandon's family was already seated at a grand table. Mr. Harold Whitmore, Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, and Brandon, all dressed impeccably, expensive accessories, polished confidence. From the very beginning, I knew they looked down on me. In their glances, in their tone, even in their greetings. Cold, measured, distant. But I didn't care. I was there for Natalie. When the food was served, Harold began speaking calmly. "Don't worry, sir," he said. "We've taken care of all the wedding expenses. You don't need to concern yourself with money. We'll handle everything." He smiled politely, but beneath that smile was condescension.
The tone in Harold's voice was as if he were offering charity, as if I were a burden he had generously agreed to carry. I forced a thin smile and nodded. "Thank you, sir. I truly appreciate your kindness." Eleanor added casually while slicing her steak, "Brandon has a professional photographer friend. We'll use our usual team, of course. The results have to be first class. These photos will be displayed in our home and shared with our business associates. They must reflect our standard." First class. That word echoed in my ears, as if anything I could provide would never be first class, as if my mere presence lowered their standards. Natalie, sitting beside me, looked uncomfortable. She stared at her plate, unable to meet my eyes. That was the most painful part. My own daughter was ashamed of me. I kept my composure. I smiled and said gently, "That's perfectly fine, as long as Natalie is happy." But inside, my heart was screaming. I wanted to stand up and reveal who I truly was, but I held back. This was their test, a test of character, and they were failing repeatedly. After the engagement dinner ended, Natalie and I walked toward the parking lot. Before she stepped into Brandon's waiting car, I gently held her hand. "Natalie," I said softly, "I have one request. Don't tell them about anything I have. Let them see me exactly as I am." She looked at me with confusion and irritation. "Dad, why are you acting like this is some soap opera? This is real life, not a TV drama." "I just want to know whether they truly respect us, whether they would treat your father well even if he were poor. That's all." She pulled her hand away. "You're overthinking. They're good people. Maybe that's just how they talk." Then she got into the car without saying goodbye. The doors slammed shut. I stood alone in the dimly lit parking lot, feeling the chill of the night and the colder chill in my daughter's heart. From that night on, Natalie never contacted me. 33 days passed without a single word. I sent messages, no reply. I called, no answer. I sent long voice notes, silence. I even wrote a handwritten letter and mailed it to her apartment in Los Angeles. Still nothing. Eventually, I surrendered to the silence. Perhaps it was time to let her go. So I returned to my old routines, tending the small garden behind my rental house in Queens, planting chili peppers and tomatoes, watering them every morning and evening, watching them grow slowly. At least plants never disappoint you. But there was one thing I did every day. I kept records. I owned a small black notebook.
Inside it, I wrote everything. Every cutting remark, every dismissive expression, every moment I was treated like garbage. I documented it all in detail. Date, time, place, who spoke, what was said. I even sketched small drawings of their facial expressions to remember the contempt in their eyes. I called it my ledger, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted memory. I wanted nothing forgotten. Every night before bed, I opened that notebook and reread its pages, and each time my heart grew stronger, more certain, that one day they would know. On the final page, just before leaving for the wedding tonight, I wrote one short sentence in thick black ink. They think this celebration belongs to them, but they have no idea who truly paid for the ballroom lighting. While they enjoyed Wagyu beef priced at $90 per serving, I stared at my simple rice dish growing cold in front of me. Across from me were not only expensive plates, but sharp insinuations wrapped in polished smiles. The engagement dinner replayed in my mind like a film on endless loop. Every detail etched clearly, every word still ringing. It had been held at an exclusive Japanese restaurant called Kazuya, tucked away on the third floor of a discreet building in Beverly Hills. A massive wooden door welcomed guests, designed in traditional Japanese style. A small ornamental garden decorated the entrance. Inside, the air carried the scent of incense and sandalwood. Authentic tatami flooring covered the space. Guests removed their shoes before entering a private dining room. The room was spacious, with a long, low table in the center. We sat cross-legged on thick cushions. The walls were made of translucent shoji panels glowing softly from hidden lights behind them. In one corner stood a small tokonoma alcove displaying fresh ekibana flowers and elegant Japanese calligraphy. The atmosphere was serene, luxurious, and cold. Cold like the Whitmore's eyes from the very beginning. The dinner followed a traditional kaiseki format, multiple courses presented one by one with exquisite precision. Each dish was plated on imported Japanese ceramics that likely cost more than my old motorcycle. I wasn't used to any of it. I didn't even know if I should use chopsticks or a fork. Eventually, I chose the spoon provided. While I struggled with food whose names I couldn't pronounce, Eleanor began speaking. She sat upright, chin slightly chinned, as if delivering a boardroom presentation. "Mr. Darrell," she said, using the Western version of my name, "we've designed a very exclusive wedding concept, garden luxury theme. We're using a celebrity florist. The allocated budget is around $55,000. $55,000. An enormous figure for someone like me. But she said it as if it were pocket change. I nodded quietly, swallowing a piece of sashimi that felt foreign on my tongue. Harold added while pouring himself sake, "We've secured Grand Regency Pavilion. It's where senators and major business families host weddings. Capacity for 300 guests, but we're limiting it to 170. Exclusivity over quantity. That's our principle." My chest tightened as I listened. They spoke about Natalie's wedding like it was a corporate project, as if she was a luxury product to be packaged and showcased to their business network. And I was merely an observer, not even a VIP guest, just someone seated in the far corner. Brandon, sitting beside Natalie, chimed in proudly. "Mom and Dad have experience with this. My older sister had her wedding at the same venue. People still talk about how magnificent it was. This time, we're aiming even higher." Natalie gave a faint smile, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I know my daughter. I know her fake smile. But she said nothing, just nodded occasionally and glanced at me with a complicated look. Was it guilt? Was it helplessness? Eleanor continued enthusiastically, "Oh, and regarding the guest list, we've created 2 categories, premium invitations for close family and key business partners." Her voice carried on, and I listened, silently, patiently, waiting. The premium invitations are printed on hardcover cardstock, Eleanor continued smoothly, with an embossed monogram and satin ribbon. Then there are the standard invitations for regular friends. You can give us a list of your acquaintances, Mr. Darrell, and we'll prepare the standard version for them. Standard. Even in invitations, there were social classes. I felt heat rising in my chest, but I remained calm. As for me, I asked evenly, how many guests may I invite? Eleanor paused briefly, pretending to consider it. Oh, let's say 5 at most. Space is limited. And besides, she smiled lightly, I assume you don't really have many acquaintances who would fit the theme of our event. We wouldn't want anything tacky. Tacky. The word slipped from her mouth so casually, as if the people who had known me for years were unworthy of attending my own daughter's wedding. I bit my lip, holding back words that burned to be spoken. Natalie remained silent. She didn't protest. The evening continued with insult after insult, wrapped in polite language. They spoke about a pre-wedding photography package costing nearly $20,000, about a custom-designed bridal gown by a well-known fashion designer, about international catering featuring Western Japanese fusion cuisine, about entertainment that would bring in a nationally televised singer. Everything was extravagant, everything was expensive, and everything felt as if it had nothing to do with me. In the middle of the conversation, Harold suddenly asked, his tone deceptively casual, So, Mr. Barrell, are you still working, or have you retired? I've retired, I answered honestly. These days I stay home and tend to a small garden. Oh, a garden, Eleanor asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. What do you grow? Chili peppers, tomatoes, vegetables, just for personal use. She nodded lightly. Well, that's nice. At least you have something to keep you busy instead of sitting around at home. Good to fill your time. Fill your time? As if my life were nothing more than empty hours that needed to be occupied, as if I were some aging man who required hobbies to avoid becoming a burden. The sting in my chest deepened. Brandon added, sounding concerned, though the condescension was clear. Yeah, Uncle, after we're married, you should come by our place. We've got a large backyard. You can help Mom with gardening. It'll be good for you, right? Help with gardening. They had already assigned my role in their future, not as a respected father-in-law, but as a free gardener. I nearly laughed, but I restrained myself. I simply smiled and nodded, as if grateful for the offer. Natalie finally spoke. Dad has loved gardening for years. He says it helps calm his mind. Oh, that's wonderful, Eleanor replied brightly, looking at me as if praising a small child. Older people should have positive hobbies. The dinner lasted nearly 3 hours, 3 hours that felt like days, every minute a slow torment, every sentence another blade. And the most painful part? Natalie never defended me once. She just sat there, silent, head lowered, as if she were no longer my daughter. When the dinner ended and we prepared to leave, Harold slapped my shoulder heartily. Mr. Darrell, don't worry. We'll take very good care of Natalie. She'll live comfortably. You don't need to concern yourself about her future. We've prepared everything. Comfortably. As if I could never have given my daughter a decent life. As if I were a burden they had generously decided to carry. I forced a faint smile. Thank you, sir. I entrust Natalie to your family. But inside, I was screaming. I wanted to tell him that Natalie didn't need their money, that I could give her a life far more luxurious than anything they were offering, that my bank accounts were thicker than all of theirs combined. But I stayed silent. This was the test, and I had chosen to see it through to the end.
In the parking garage, I stood alone, waiting for the rideshare I had booked. My motorcycle was under repair that week, so I had no choice. Natalie and Brandon entered their luxury sedan. Before they drove off, Natalie rolled down the window. "Dad, you'll get home okay?" "I already booked a ride," she said. "Be careful." Then the window went up. The car drove away. I stood there under the cold night air, and for the first time in years, tears rolled down my face. Not because I was weak, but because I had lost my daughter. Not physically, emotionally. She had chosen their world, and I had become nothing more than an embarrassing fragment of her past. The driver arrived. I climbed in silently. During the ride home through the bright streets of Los Angeles, I said nothing. I thought about everything they had said and everything Natalie hadn't said, and I knew this wasn't over. There was still one night left, the wedding night, and that night, everything would change. Now, back in the present, I stood in the ballroom of Grand Regency Pavilion, surrounded by guests still laughing while my face was covered in cake and my heart lay shattered. But something inside me had shifted. Something long asleep had awakened. It was time for them to learn who truly stood before them. After the cake incident, I walked slowly towards the restroom. My steps were heavy, not from weakness, but from the immense anger I was holding in. Frosting clung to my face, my hair, even inside my ears. Some guests looked at me with pity, others struggled to suppress laughter. A few were already glued to their phones, likely uploading the humiliating video to social media. Inside the restroom, I stood before a large mirror. My appearance was a mess, my shirt stained, but my eyes burned with something new. Not tears, not sorrow, determination. I washed my face slowly with soap and water. With every wipe, the frosting disappeared, and so did the last remnants of my patience. I remembered every moment they belittled me, the engagement dinner, the family meetings at their mansion to discuss wedding details, even brief phone calls with Eleanor that always ended the same way. "All right then, Mr. Darrell, we're busy. We'll inform you if necessary." I dried my face and stepped out of the restroom. My shirt was still damp and stained, but I no longer cared. I walked back into the ballroom with firmer steps. Some guests looked surprised. Perhaps they thought I had left. Perhaps they hoped I had left. But I wasn't done. I returned to my table, nearly empty now. Most guests had moved to the photo area or gathered around the stage. In front of me sat a plate of rice that had long gone cold. I wasn't hungry. My stomach churned, but I remained seated, watching the stage, watching Natalie and Brandon posing with their important guests, waiting, because soon the spotlight would shift.
Sophia looked exhausted. Her smile was no longer as bright as it had been earlier. The makeup around her eyes had begun to smudge, maybe from sweat, maybe from tears. I didn't know. I could no longer read my own daughter. Daniel stood beside her, radiating confidence. He laughed loudly, wrapping his arm around his guests, joking freely, as if nothing at all had been wrong with what he had just done to me. I took a long breath and closed my eyes for a moment. Then I opened the small leather bag I had been carrying. Inside was a sealed red envelope containing my wedding gift and a neatly folded thin document. A document that proved who I really was. But I didn't take it out. Not yet. Instead, I simply held the envelope in my trembling hand. Not because I was afraid, but because my body was reacting to the sugar that had gotten into my mouth earlier. I felt slightly dizzy, my heart beating faster than usual. My blood sugar had definitely spiked. But I could not afford to look weak now. Not tonight. Just then, an elderly gentleman approached me. He walked with a polished wooden cane and wore a tailored black suit. His face looked familiar, but I couldn't immediately place him. He sat beside me without asking and studied me with an unreadable expression. "Mr. Donovan?" he asked, softly but firmly. I nodded. "Yes, I'm sorry, and you are?" He gave a faint smile. "My name is Victor Whitman. We met years ago at the launch of the Bright Mind Learning Platform back in 2015. You attended as the principal investor." My heart skipped. Victor Whitman, the former commissioner of the National Infrastructure Authority and once a senior advisor to several major Silicon Valley tech corporations. We had indeed crossed paths multiple times at formal events connected to Bright Mind Learning, but I had never invited him to this wedding. "Mr. Whitman, I didn't realize you would be here," I said, surprised. He shook his head slightly. "I'm an old friend of Charles Harrison. We're both active in the American Business Council. I was invited as an honored guest. I had no idea that Daniel's father-in-law was you until I saw what happened earlier." He paused, then continued in a firmer tone. "I know who you are. I know what you've contributed to American education, and I won't stand by while they belittle you like this." "There's no need—" I tried to interrupt. He raised his hand gently. "You're too kind, too patient, but even patience has limits. Allow me to help you." Before I could answer, the MC returned to the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed with speeches from both families. First, please welcome a representative from the groom's family, Mr. Charles Harrison." Charles stepped onto the stage confidently, gripping the microphone. "Good evening, distinguished guests. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for attending the wedding of our son, Daniel, and Sophia." Applause filled the ballroom. "Tonight is a very special night for our family. We're thrilled to unite two families in this sacred bond. Daniel and Sophia are a perfect match. We are confident they will build a happy and prosperous life together." He paused briefly and glanced in my direction. "We would also like to thank the bride's family for entrusting their daughter to us. We promise to take the very best care of Sophia. She will live comfortably and abundantly with our family." Comfortably, abundantly. There it was again. As though Sophia had lived in deprivation before, as though I had been incapable of providing her a good life. The guests applauded, unaware of the sting hidden behind those polished words. "Thank you once again. Please enjoy the rest of the evening." Charles stepped down to cheers and compliments. The MC continued, "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Now we will hear a speech from the bride's family. Please welcome—" He paused. He looked down on his cue cards, confusion spreading across his face. He whispered to one of the event coordinators beside him. I knew exactly what was happening. They had not included my name in the program. They had never planned for me to speak. To them, I was not worthy of standing on that stage. The MC cleared his throat awkwardly. "It appears there will be no formal remarks from the bride's family, so we will proceed to the next." "Just a moment." Victor Whitman's voice cut through the air. He stood from his seat, leaning on his cane, and made his way towards the stage. The crowd began to murmur. The MC looked completely bewildered. Victor stepped onto the platform and gently took the microphone. "My apologies for the interruption, but I feel compelled to speak. My name is Victor Whitman, former commissioner of the National Infrastructure Authority and a longtime friend of the Harrison family." Below the stage, Charles looked momentarily confused, but still smiling, likely assuming Victor would offer additional praise. "I've known Charles and his family for years. They are accomplished and respected. But tonight, I witnessed something I cannot ignore." His tone shifted, now firmer. "A few minutes ago, I saw the groom, Daniel Harrison, shove his own father-in-law's head into the wedding cake in front of all of you." Silence blanketed the ballroom. Guests who hadn't seen the incident turned to their neighbors. Others reopened the videos on their phones. Perhaps to some of you it was just a joke, but to me it was an act of humiliation. A humiliation directed at a father who came here sincerely to celebrate his daughter's happiness. And what pains me even more, none of you stood up for him. Daniel shifted uncomfortably below the stage. "Mr. Whitman, it was just a joke, just trying to lighten the mood. No bad intentions." Victor's gaze sharpened. "A joke? You believe publicly humiliating a parent in front of hundreds of guests is a joke?" He paused, his voice lowering, quieter but cutting deeper. "You all deserve to know who it is you just humiliated." Every eye in the ballroom turned towards him. I had already risen from my seat, and even I didn't know exactly what he was about to reveal next.
The unemployed father-in-law you've been mocking is Jonathan Donovan, the first investor of the BrightMind digital learning platform. The very platform your children used for online classes during the pandemic. The platform that has now expanded into 6 Southeast Asian countries. The whispers grew louder. Several faces in the crowd began to change. I saw Margaret cover her mouth with her hand. Charles Harrison looked pale. Victor Whitman continued. In 2021, BrightMind was acquired by a major South Korean tech corporation with a valuation exceeding $130 billion. And the man you've been belittling tonight owns a permanent 8% stake in that company. Total silence. No one spoke. Even the background music had stopped. All eyes turned toward me in disbelief. After Victor's revelation, the ballroom, once filled with laughter and chatter, fell into an oppressive stillness. 170 pairs of eyes stared at me differently now. No longer with pity, no longer with disdain, but with astonishment, disbelief, some even with fear. I remained standing beside the now empty dining table. In my hand, I still held the red envelope. It contained more than just money. Inside was a certified check for $20 million, written specifically for Sophia. Not to buy her love, but to prove that I had always been capable of giving her the very best. She just never knew. Victor stepped down from the stage slowly, leaning on his cane. As he passed me, he gently patted my shoulder and whispered, "Forgive me if I overstepped, but I couldn't stand watching a good man treated like that." I shook my head slightly. "Thank you. You did the right thing." The guests began whispering again. Phones were lifted once more, but this time not to replay humiliation. They were searching for information about BrightMind and Jonathan Donovan. Some guests from the back tables stood up and began inching closer, perhaps wanting to introduce themselves or apologize. I hadn't moved. A middle-aged woman whispered loud enough for her husband to hear. "I read about that deal. BrightMind sold for over $100 billion, right? That means he's a major investor." "Oh my God," someone else murmured. "I saw him sitting alone near the exit earlier." A man leaned toward his friend. 8% of $130 billion, that's billions in equity, and he's wearing a modest old suit.
The cameras that had once pointed toward the wedding cake and stage now turned toward me. Some guests were already uploading new posts to social media with very different captions. I caught a glimpse of one phone screen beside me. Turns out the bride's father is a bright-minded billionaire investor. Margaret suddenly rose from her seat and hurried toward me. Her face was pale, her smile forced. She grabbed my hand with both of hers, gripping tightly as though we were long-time friends. "Mr. Donovan, please forgive us. This has all been a misunderstanding. It's just the atmosphere of a party. Sometimes things get carried away. It was all just joking around. There was no bad intention." I looked into her eyes. The same eyes that once held quiet contempt now shimmered with panic. "A misunderstanding of what, Margaret?" I asked calmly. "A misunderstanding when I was seated at the very corner table? A misunderstanding when I was told I could only invite 5 friends because you were afraid they'd look tacky? Or a misunderstanding when my head was shoved into the wedding cake in front of everyone?" She froze. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her hands, still gripping mine, felt cold and trembling. Daniel rushed over next. His face was red, whether from embarrassment or panic, I couldn't tell. "Uncle Jonathan, I honestly didn't know you were someone important. If I had known you were such a major investor, I would never have done that. I swear, I was just fooling around. No bad intentions, I promise." I stared at him for a long moment. The same young man who had laughed loudly while humiliating me now stood before me with pleading eyes. I took a slow breath and said, calmly but firmly, "So, if I were poor, it would have been acceptable to humiliate me?" Daniel had no answer, because there isn't one. Charles Harrison approached as well. His face was far more serious now. The usual aura of confidence he carried was gone. "Mr. Donovan, as the head of this family, I sincerely apologize for my son's behavior. This is our mistake. We promised to make things right. You are still part of our family." Part of the family. The irony stung. Since when had they considered me family? Since they discovered I had money. Gently, I released Margaret's trembling hands and began walking toward the ballroom exit. Guests who had been blocking my path quickly stepped aside. Some even bowed their heads slightly as I passed. How ironic. Minutes ago, they had laughed at my humiliation. Now they bowed. Daniel hurried after me. "Please don't leave yet. We still have the ceremonial cake cutting and the family prayer. You'd need to be here. This is Sophia's wedding too." I stopped walking and turned to Daniel. "You're right. This is Sophia's wedding too. But from the very beginning, none of you ever considered me part of this celebration. You saw me as a burden, as an embarrassing, poor old man. So why do you want me to stay now? Please, for Sophia's sake, she'll be devastated if you leave," Daniel pleaded, his voice beginning to shake. I looked across the ballroom, searching for Sophia. She was still standing near the stage, but her face was now ghostly pale. Her makeup had run. Tears streamed down her cheeks. One hand covered her mouth as if she had just realized something deeply painful. Our eyes met. In that gaze, I saw regret. I saw guilt, but I also saw confusion. She was torn. She didn't know what to do. The MC, still standing on stage, attempted to salvage the situation. His voice trembled. "Ladies and gentlemen, let us continue the evening in a positive spirit. We will now proceed to the ceremonial—" "I believe I've had enough for tonight," I said, cutting him off. My voice wasn't loud, but in the silent ballroom it carried clearly. I resumed walking toward the exit. Several guests tried to greet me or stop me, but I only offered a thin smile and kept walking. I was tired. Tired of the hypocrisy. Tired of people who valued others only by wealth and status.
Just as I reached the doors, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. I turned. Sophia was running toward me, lifting the long train of her white gown. One of her heels had fallen off, but she didn't care. Her face was wet with tears, her makeup ruined, yet she kept running. "Dad!" she cried, her voice breaking. I stopped. My heart pounded heavily in my chest. The entire ballroom now watched the two of us. Daniel tried to follow her, but Margaret held him back. Perhaps she understood that this was a moment between father and daughter, not a time for anyone else to interfere. Sophia stood in front of me, breathing hard. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling. She looked at me with overwhelming regret. "Dad, please don't leave. Please don't go home tonight." I didn't answer. I simply looked at her, waiting for what she would say next. "I was wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "I was so wrong. I was stupid. I wanted so badly to be accepted by them that I forgot who has always been there for me." Her tears flowed harder. "Daniel isn't who I thought he was. He's not the man I believed he was." I remained silent. My heart ached hearing her words, but I needed to know, was she truly remorseful or merely embarrassed because my secret had been exposed? She continued, almost whispering, "I understand now why you kept everything hidden. I was wrong not to trust you. I wanted to live like them. I wanted so badly to belong in their world, but I forgot. I already had my own world, a simple one, a sincere one, with you." Several women among the guests began quietly sobbing. Even Margaret dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, though I suspected her tears came more from humiliation than emotion. At last, I spoke. "Are you sure you want to walk away from all this? From this luxury wedding? From Daniel?" Sophia nodded firmly. "They never saw me as family. They just wanted me to look good in their photos. I was an accessory to them, not a person." Daniel, hearing that, tried to approach again. "Sophia, don't do this. We can talk this through. I promise I'll change. I'll respect Mr. Donovan more." "That's enough, Daniel." Sophia cut him off sharply. The entire ballroom gasped. It was the first time all evening she had raised her voice. "You're only afraid of losing your family's reputation. You're afraid the video will go viral and hurt your business. You don't actually care about my feelings or my father's." Daniel fell silent, his face flushed. He couldn't deny it. Sophia turned back to me. "Dad, I want to go home. Back to our house in Brookside, not to their mansion in the hills. I choose to go home with you." The wound in my chest began to warm. My daughter, the one I had raised with love, had come back to me. I opened my arms and pulled her into a tight embrace. She cried against my chest like she used to when she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. And for the first time that night, I let my own tears fall. The ballroom that had been filled with glittering luxury and celebration now echoed only with Sophia's sobs and the hushed whispers of stunned guests. This was no longer a wedding reception. It had become a real-life drama no one had expected to witness. Margaret hurried forward in panic. "Sophia, sweetheart, don't be emotional. This is your big day. Don't ruin everything over a small misunderstanding." Sophia released me and looked at Margaret, her eyes still wet. "This isn't a small misunderstanding. This is about how your family treated my father, and I cannot forgive that." Charles Harrison tried a softer tone. "Sophia, let's handle this calmly. Your father is here. We're all here. There's no need to go this far." But Sophia shook her head firmly. She removed the long veil from her hair and placed it on a nearby chair.
Then she slipped off her expensive white high heels, custom designer shoes worth nearly $2,500, and stood barefoot on the cold marble ballroom floor. "I've made my decision. I'm going home with my father, not as Daniel's wife, but as Jonathan Donovan's daughter." Her declaration struck the room like thunder. Complete silence followed. Even the background music, which had briefly resumed, was cut off again. The MC stood frozen on stage, microphone still in hand. I looked at Sophia, my eyes glassy. "Are you sure? This is a major decision. People will talk." She gave a small smile through her tears. "Let them talk. What matters is that I'm going back to the right place. A house that may be small, but has a big heart." I took her hand. Together, we walked towards the exit. This time, the guests parted for us with very different expressions. Not mockery, admiration. Admiration for Sophia's courage. Admiration for a father-daughter bond stronger than wealth or status. In the dimly lit parking lot, wearing a wedding gown that cost nearly $25,000, Sophia ran not towards the altar, but towards me, breathless and crying. "Dad, don't go home alone tonight." We walked out of the Grand Ashton Pavilion with steady steps. Sophia still wore her long, luxurious wedding dress, but she carried her shoes in her hand. Her bare feet touched the cool pavement, damp with evening dew. I took off my suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders to keep her warm. My old 2011 Toyota Camry was parked in the farthest corner. I had parked it there intentionally, embarrassed by its worn paint and scratches. The body had faded, the right side mirror was cracked, and the exhaust sometimes released dark smoke. But tonight, that old car felt priceless, because it would take us home. I opened the passenger door for Sophia. She struggled to get in, her voluminous gown filling the seat. I carefully lifted the layers of textile so they wouldn't drag against the floor. Once she was comfortably seated, I closed the door and walked around to the driver's side. Before getting in, I glanced back at the Grand Ashton Pavilion. From the outside, it still looked magnificent, crystal chandeliers glittering through tall glass windows. Faint music drifted into the night air. Though I was certain the atmosphere inside had changed entirely. The guests were probably whispering, replaying videos, posting updates online. By morning, tonight's story would be everywhere. But I no longer cared. I had regained what mattered most. My daughter. I got into the car and shut the door. The creaking sound contrasted sharply with the luxury we had just left behind. I turned the key several times before the engine finally started with a rough growl. Sophia gave a small smile. "This car is still loyal." "Yes," I replied softly. "Just like your father." We drove out of the parking lot in silence. The streets of Seattle were quiet that night. Streetlights cast a gentle golden glow over the road. Occasionally, another car would pass by, or a motorcycle would roar by. But inside our car, there was only a comfortable silence. Finally, Sophia spoke softly. "Dad, our house may be small, but its heart is big." I glanced at her briefly while keeping my eyes on the road. "You won't regret leaving all that luxury behind?" Sophia shook her head slowly. "I've regretted it for a long time, Dad. I regret leaving you. I regret being ashamed of you. I chose their fake world over our sincere one." She paused, her eyes shimmering with tears. "I thought living in luxury would make me happy, but it didn't. They never saw me as family. I was just a pretty doll for their photos, a trophy to show off to their business associates." I listened with mixed emotions. I was relieved she finally understood, but I was also sad she had to endure so much pain to learn that lesson. "I was never angry at you, Sophie," I said.
my voice trembling slightly. "I was only hurt that you didn't trust me." "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I was foolish, too easily influenced. I forgot the person who loves me most." She began sobbing again, her tears soaking into the fabric of her once glorious wedding gown, now feeling more like a burden than a dream. I reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. "I forgave you a long time ago. I was just waiting for you to come back. And now you're here. That's more than enough." The drive from the upscale district of Kempton Heights back to Brookside took about 45 minutes. The farther we got from the elite neighborhoods of southern Seattle, the livelier the streets became. We passed late-night diners still open under neon signs, food trucks parked along sidewalks, small night markets buzzing with chatter, and dense residential blocks filled with modest homes standing shoulder to shoulder. This was our world. Simple, alive, real. When we arrived in front of our rented house, Sophia stepped out carefully. She stood there for a long moment staring at it. A small, half-brick, half-wood house with peeling paint, a tin roof rusted in places, a narrow porch with 2 faded plastic chairs. Nothing luxurious, nothing impressive, but it was full of memories. "I missed this house," she whispered. I unlocked the key with a key worn smooth from years of use. The door creaked loudly as it opened. The house felt cool and quiet. It hadn't truly been lived in for days. I switched on the light. The dim fluorescent bulb illuminated our tiny living room. An old couch with faded upholstery, a simple wooden table holding framed photographs in inexpensive frames. Photos of Sophia as a child. Her first day of elementary school, her college graduation. Every milestone captured simply, but with love. Sophia walked slowly around the room, touching the walls, the table, the frames, as if trying to reconnect with memories she had once left behind. "Sit down, Sophie. I'll make some tea," I said, heading toward the kitchen. "Dad, I need to change first. This dress is so heavy." She laughed softly. "Your room is still the same. I never changed anything." She walked toward her small bedroom at the end of the house. I heard the door open and close. Meanwhile, I began boiling water in our tiny kitchen. The kitchen had a single-burner gas stove, a modest dish rack, and a sink slightly rusted around the edges. But this was where I had cooked for her since she was little, where I had taught her how to make her first fried rice, where we had washed dishes together, talking about her school days. When the water boiled, I poured it into 2 glasses and dropped in tea bags. Then I opened the small refrigerator and took out something I had prepared earlier that morning. A small celebratory dinner ox, roast chicken, cornbread, and her favorite mashed potatoes from the local diner. I had ordered it yesterday, hoping that one day she would come home. That hope became reality tonight. I placed the tea and the dinner box on the table. Sophia came out wearing an old t-shirt and sweatpants. Her hair, once styled elegantly, now fell loosely around her shoulders. Her makeup was gone. Her face looked tired, but peaceful. "You got roast chicken?" she asked, her eyes lighting up. "I ordered it yesterday. I had a feeling you'd come home." She sat in the same chair she had used since childhood, staring at the simple meal with moist eyes. "You always know what I need, don't you?" We ate together at our small dining table. No gold-plated cutlery, no gourmet dishes with foreign names, just homemade-style comfort food. Yet it tasted far better than anything served at that extravagant reception. Between bites, Sophia smiled. "I missed Mrs. Carter's cooking. Tomorrow we'll get breakfast at our usual spot. Mrs. Green will be shocked to see you back." Sophia laughed softly. "She'll ask a million questions. And what will you say?" Sophia looked at me with clear eyes. "I'll say I came home because I chose the right family. A family that doesn't measure people by money or status. A family that's sincere." After dinner, we sat on the couch drinking warm tea. She leaned against my shoulder like she used to when she was little and loved listening to bedtime stories. We looked at the old photos on the wall. Dad, safety doesn't come from expensive venues. It comes from this small dining table. I stroked her hair gently. I could lose everything, money, investments, houses, but I will never lose you again. I promise I'll never leave you again, no matter what happens, she whispered. As expected, within days, the wedding incident videos spread everywhere. Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, even online forums and news blogs. The video of Daniel pushing my head into the wedding cake. The video of Richard Whitmore revealing my identity. The video of Sophia walking away from the altar and choosing to go home with me. Comments flooded in. Some supported us. Others harshly criticized the Harrison family. The Harrisons' reputation began to crumble. Business partners quietly withdrew. A nearly finalized real estate development deal worth tens of millions of dollars was suddenly canceled after investors questioned the family's integrity. Richard later informed me that several major corporations had decided to cut ties with Charles Harrison's companies, not because I asked them to, but because the business world values character, and what they had shown that night was a lack of it. I didn't feel satisfaction watching their downfall. Only sadness. All of this could have been avoided if they had treated others with respect, if they had judged people by their character, not appearances. One afternoon, I was watering my chili and tomato plants on the porch when Sophia came out carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. "Dad, Margaret called me today." "What did she say?" "She apologized, asked me to come back to Daniel, said they've changed." "And what did you say?" "I told her it's too late. I've already found real happiness. Not happiness from money or status, but from sincere family." I looked at my daughter with pride. She had grown. She had learned. She had chosen the right path. That night, after Sophia went to bed, I sat alone in the living room and opened my old black notebook, that one I once called my revenge journal. On the last page was a sentence I had written long ago. "They think this party belongs to them. They don't know who really paid for the ballroom lighting." I smiled faintly. Then I wrote one final line beneath it. "The best revenge is letting them humiliate themselves." I closed the notebook and placed it in the drawer. I would not open it again. The past was over. It was time to focus on the future. Before going to sleep, I checked an old email account I rarely used. There was a new message from an international education corporation based in Singapore. Subject line, Global Senior Advisor Offer. They offered me a senior advisory position with a remarkable salary package, well into 7 figures annually, along with luxury benefits. Once upon a time, I would have accepted immediately. But now my priorities were different. I smiled at the screen and typed a short reply. "Thank you for the generous offer. However, at this time, I choose to remain at home with my daughter. There is nothing more valuable than family." I clicked send. Then I closed the laptop and walked toward my bedroom. Before entering, I paused by Sophia's room and looked through the slightly open door. She was sleeping peacefully. No more tension on her face. No fear, no doubt. And I knew my decision was the right one, because home is not about how large or luxurious a building is. Home is about who you share its warmth with. And as long as Sophia is here, in this small house in Brookside, this is where I belong. This is my true home.